Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome to the Guilty as Charged podcast, coming to you live on a Wednesday afternoon, just before the NBA Finals kickoff. Game 3 tonight, obviously, Thunder and Pacers. Game 2 not as entertaining as Game 1. Game 1 was crazy. So hopefully tonight's game is a little bit better, and we'll get into that here in a second. But excited to talk some minicamp updates. The Chargers obviously have had their promo day, which all of the photos from that promo day were just like lights out. You pointed out some very memeable pictures in a little bit. But the Chargers have had 2 practices, another practice tomorrow, and then the Chargers will be off until training camp, which starts on July 17th. So they'll have about 5 weeks off, I think, before everybody has to reconvene and get back together here. So we'll have a lot of that to cover, previews, things like that. But for now, some mini camp updates. And joining me as always is my guy Tyler. Tyler, what's up, man? How you doing tonight?
Mostly hating my time off from work, and I can totally just go back to work right now. I really don't mind. I like staying busy. Today, though, we did go to Knott's Berry Farms. That was fun, just to go in for a few hours.
Again?
Yeah, we have passes now. I did not go the last time. So I went with my school, then I went with my family. Today I went with my wife. So other than my dog, I've been with everybody.
There you go.
Now I've got the system down. Now I'm officially like a Knott's head or whatever.
I did not know Knott's Berry Farm was like that. I thought it was kind of old and run down. So
it's a classic, I suppose. It's a classic.
Okay. All right, fair enough. So my parents are in town. My grandma, my 90-year-old grandma, is in town this week as well. So we went up today. There's an old Air Force museum up in this little town called Atwater, where my uncle David served and was stationed. And so we went up and saw all these old planes. Both of my grandpas served in the Navy and flew planes, and so planes are a big part of the Hagelin family. And so my dad is a huge plane nerd. We went up to formerly Castle Air Force Base, Castle Hill Museum now. Had a good time today. Actually had some killer Asian food in Merced, which I never would have guessed, but Brooke found this little ramen joint, and we had some great ramen afterwards. So it was a good day today.
Nice. Lovely to hear. Yes, military. I don't know. It's less common, I suppose, these days with anybody that I know or any of my friends, but every one of our grandparents, great uncles, you name it, we're all involved in some way. So shout out to the Hagelin family.
Yeah, so my grandma was telling us, so my grandma grew up on Hawaii. She lived through Pearl Harbor, and we were walking past this like huge B-52 plane, and I guess that they used to that's how they used to fly from Hawaii to California. And nowadays, LA to Honolulu is like a 4-hour flight. But back then, it was like a 10-hour flight because the planes just could not go that fast. So she said her first time going to California, it took her like 10 hours plus time change to get to LA. So a little bit of a different time there.
Yeah. I'll let you know how long the flight is in July 10th when I'm in Hawaii.
Yeah. You're going direct to Maui, right?
I think it's Kauai. I used to have to go to Honolulu and then bounce over to Kauai, but I think this one's just a one-way straight shot.
That makes sense. Seems like our guy Sean was successful in his engagement.
Yes,
you guys might recall a few weeks ago, getting married somewhere in New England, July 2027.
Cool.
Congrats. Hopefully everything went smoothly. It sounds like it did. So appreciate Sean for jumping in here and always supporting the show.
Yes, congrats, Sean.
All right, before we get into some mini camp takeaways, we'll probably take some questions as well today. So feel free and save those. Super chats always appreciated, and as you guys know. But before we get started on some mini camp takeaways, of course, I have to give you a quick shout out to our friends over at PrizePicks. There is still time for you to hop in for today's action and be able to build your lineup for the finals. Obviously, we talked about this earlier. There is going to be a game on Friday this week, which means you will be able to use the finals, the basketball finals, for a Flex Friday, which is where you can opt in and tap the checkbox in your lineup builder to be eligible for the protected play. You can choose squares from any game on the board. If your lineup does not win, you get your net losses back and promo funds up to your promo limit as soon as the lineup settles. So there's potentially only 3 more games left to be able to partake in the basketball arena. Obviously, there's the WNBA and things like that. But if you are a diehard NBA fan, make sure and check out Prize Picks until the end of the season. Flex Friday is a fantastic opportunity for those of you who are like myself, who are a little stingy when it comes to money and don't want to lose it. So check that out. The best way to support our show and Prize Picks is to go to the Prize Picks app, obviously the app store, whichever app store you use. Download the app, use the code GUILTY to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, that is code GUILTY to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Okay, we'll have some takeaways, but every time we hop on here, there's always questions, and there's questions in our Discord, questions in my DMs, questions in my comments about Justin Herbert and why he's wearing a leg sleeve at practice. He addressed those questions today, saying that the leg sleeve through most of the spring practices is to, quote, keep everything warm. And then he followed up and said, just knees in general, something that over the course of the years, it's just best to stay out there and stay loose and stay warm. Sean Merriman was at practice the other day, said that there's no injury to report of. He looks great in practice, but Herbert has said, he wants to keep things warm, which if you've been dealing with knee injuries in your life, to me, I dealt with knee tendonitis my entire life as an athlete. That's kind of what it sounds like to me. A pure speculation. I don't know. That could not be the case. But from what he said and what my experience was, it kind of sounds like he's dealing with some kind of knee tendonitis, some kind of minor issue that shouldn't prevent him from playing in the games, but it can definitely be a little bothersome. And I don't know if you have any takeaways there, but we get a ton of questions about it. So I figure we'll address it today, since Herbert finally spoke to the media and addressed it himself.
Yeah, on the one hand, I was hoping for a more of an answer. On the other hand, I guess I'm thankful that it's not, like I have a torn ACL or something ridiculous like that. So I suppose I can't complain. Sure, it is concerning, and I thought the answer was a little odd. I was like, I just want to keep it warm, when it's a different one that he's worn before. Like if it were kind of the same one, he did this every year, and that's just what he did, I wouldn't think too much of it. But given he's had some injuries, he's been banged up, he's worn a sleeve before for an actual injury and dealing with something, like him on the other leg, like I'm glad if it helps him, great. Like I have no complaints there. If that's what he feels is best for him, makes him comfortable, or even if it's just precautionary, whatever. Like I'm totally fine with that. But do I really have a takeaway? Not necessarily, but there wasn't really much to be given either.
Yeah, no, and Herbert's never going to be like, oh, this is what's going on with my knee.
100%. Yep.
At every turn, whenever he's dealt with an injury, he's wanted to speak as little about it as possible. And last year with a foot injury, people kept on trying to ask about it. And you could tell in each press conference, he was so annoyed by it. I was at a press conference last year when he was asked about an injury, and then there were like 4 follow-ups, and you could just tell that after that he was just kind of done with doing the press conference. So he never is going to talk about an injury unless it's like, the bare minimum. So it's not like he's going to be doing a big takeaway about his injuries or whatever. But he is practicing. He has not been missing time. He looks great. He was at a golf tournament this past weekend. So it's not something that's going to be an extensive thing that will cause him to miss time, but tendonitis can definitely be bothersome for sure. It can, hurt when you're walking around. It can hurt when you're planting your leg, but thankfully for now, it just seems like something he's managing, and it doesn't seem like it's anything serious.
Yeah, thankfully.
All right, so we'll get to some actual takeaways. Again, we're not there for this week. I will be at a few training camp practices, so I'll let you guys know when that happens. But for now, we're just relying on the good old social media videos, reporter takeaways, obviously the great write-ups from Eric Smith and Daniel Popper in particular. So for you, Tyler, through 2 days of practice, what's been your main standout so far?
Yeah, I think it's been the entire receiver room. You could argue just pass catchers in general, but there's a lot of different pieces and storylines happening with the receiver room. So for
Yeah.
one, they brought in Willie Snead, had been with the Ravens before with Joe Ortiz, with Greg Roman. They brought him in for a tryout. He's not officially signed. Greg Roman in his press conference said like he's, these younger guys should be picking his brain, that sort of thing. So that's notable. Also notable, people are asking in our chat right now about like Luke Grimm, for example, Jalen Reagor. So right now, and I had it in front of me, and of course I lost it right before I was going to talk about it, but I believe both Mike Williams and Keandre Lambert-Smith and also Luke Grimm are working off to the side.
Yep.
How much does that mean in regards to injury? I don't know. Right now, they are working off to the side, which is a bummer. Herbert said today that like some of the younger guys are picking up on the offense, and that's great. Like you said, Keandre Lambert-Smith is picking up the offense. That's awesome. I don't. What else is Herbert going to say? I don't know, but I guess he's doing that, working off to the side, which has now allowed, as Caleb has mentioned here, Jalen Reagor to be taking first team reps with the Chargers. Now, does that mean with everyone healthy that he's involved with the first team? I don't think so. But he is very involved right now. Currently, depends on where, they think Trey Harris is going to be. But right now, Trey Harris is kind of firmly with like the second group that will work with Herbert a little bit. And then with the second team, with whoever the backup quarterback is, it seems like it's been Heineke for most of minicamp. So a lot to discuss there. Am I particularly worried or concerned about one thing or the other? No, but there's a couple of moving things right now that have caught my attention.
Yeah, I think in terms of the receiver roles, like it's very early. The Chargers are going to be very patient with injuries. But the first team receivers that, as far as we know, the main three with the starting offense have been Ladd, Quentin Johnston, and then Jalen Reagor. And Trey Harris will rotate in, Mike Williams will rotate in, and Darius Davis will rotate in, who sounds like he's also having a pretty good, spring and summer so far as well. Keandre Lambert-Smith has missed a lot of practice from what we can gather, potentially dealing with something minor. We talked about the Sanjay Lal quote tweet where he thinks that Trey Harris and Keandre are behind the eight ball when it comes to, the physicality and game shape and things like that, which makes sense. They're just getting into the swing of things. So I don't love the fact that Keandre Lambert-Smith is also potentially dealing with an injury. I don't know if you saw this, but Ben Johnson had a little rant about how valuable these practices are, even if they aren't like scrimmages, even if there's not pads, because Luther Burden has been missing practices for them. And, it's even if you're just doing, low tempo 7-on-7 stuff as a young player, you got to come into these situations and get as many reps as possible, because even if you're not going full speed, it's the mental aspect of things. It's the technique. It's the nuance. It's the playbook. And so Keandre Lambert-Smith and every rookie can be studying and watching film and things like that. But, this is the spring is used as kind of a tone setter for training camp. And so I don't love the fact that Keandre Lambert-Smith is missing time. Do I think it's going to impact his overall ability to make the roster? Probably not. But it's very clearly giving opportunities to guys like Darius Davis and Jalen Reagor and things like that. And so far, those guys seem to be taking advantage of those opportunities.
Yeah, as far as making the roster, given where they took Lambert-Smith, I think he's safe. If this were a Cornelius Johnson, Brendan Rice in round 7, you can very much so worry about his spot. Right. But given where they took him, I think you feel okay. I think the difference at this point, especially if he can't get on and really practice in full, is he active? Because we thought, okay, right, given his speed, he could be the returner over Darius Davis. Maybe Davis's job is in jeopardy, or with his speed and what they feel like he can do with him vertically. Yeah, that would like naturally knock out someone like Jalen Reagor, who might be, we kind of considered him maybe a bubble guy anyway, like could sneak onto the roster because of how much they like him. I think you had reported something like the Chargers are very high on Jalen Reagor to a certain extent. But now it's like, is Keandre Lambert-Smith going to be active on game day? That's the real thing at this point. And that might take some time. So bummer for sure. Do I think it, kicks him off the roster? No, but this could kind of be like a Junior Colson thing where, the guy literally knew the defense, and those live reps mattered so much that he really just couldn't get on the field. Injuries and appendicitis, etc. Yeah. But he couldn't get on the field. And even knowing Jesse Minter's defense, he couldn't get out there and be 100%. So it's going to take a while for Keandre Lambert-Smith, who isn't exactly a diverse plug and play like route tree kind of guy anyway.
Right.
So unfortunately, he's going to be starting a little bit further back than I think some Chargers fans wanted, and where everyone thought that he would come in and win like wide receiver 2 or 3 on this team somehow. He's now firmly behind Jalen Reagor on the depth chart.
Yeah, and the good news for Keandre Lambert-Smith, right, is like the Chargers they're not going to cut him. Like he's going to make the roster, because if you cut him, he's probably going to get swiped up. And nobody's going to swipe up Jalen Reagor. I can promise you that. They could cut him, and he could be this year's Tony Jefferson, where he flirts back and forth between the roster. He's a practice squad guy, he's an active roster guy. He gets cut a couple of times, and he just gives them that flexibility. Greg Roman cannot stop talking about him. Like Greg Roman is very high on Jalen Reagor, at least publicly. And where does that necessarily stem from? I'm not quite sure. He's definitely fast. He can definitely work vertically. That sideline catch against the Saints from last year was probably one of the 3 best catches of the year of any Chargers receiver. But then there's obviously always the Cardinals game and things like that. So very up and down performances from him, but I would consider him a lock for the practice squad at this point. And he can be that guy where he can move back and forth between the practice squad. And it's June, right? But if the Chargers had a game today, Reagor is getting snaps over Keandre Lambert-Smith, and I think Darius Davis as well. Like I think he would potentially get snaps over Trey Harris, depending on where he's at with his, level of fitness. But Chargers fans are going to be, I think, a little surprised at how much Reagor plays this year as well, because last year they were not happy when he was signed, particularly Alex Hinsdorf. He's going to be a factor this year, and he's probably going to have a couple moments where he either makes a play and helps the Chargers out, or unfortunately has a negative play where it doesn't help the Chargers out. But I would expect he is a factor in 2025.
Yes, cannot write him off. He's probably the one that we kind of add as that last minute, like 52nd, 53rd guy when we do our roster predictions.
Yeah.
We'll see. But yeah, last year, so many injuries, they needed to sign players kind of out of necessity. In this case, I mean, technically he has a job, or he's playing as much as he is right now because of injuries, but they brought back Mike Williams. They have Keandre Lambert-Smith. They have Trey Harris. And he's actually still out there. So it's not even just out of necessity at this point. Like they really do show they believe in him. They've said as much. So yeah, he's going to be involved, and go for it.
Yeah, hopefully not too involved. I'm definitely not advocating for him to play a ton, but it sounds like the coach staff is very high on him. Kind of same conversation here in terms of a pass catcher. Oronde Gadsden has continued to flash in minicamp and OTAs. Again, the reporters have not been present at every practice, and we are not present at practices. But of all of the rookies so far, maybe outside of Omari and Hampton, Gadsden has been the one that has been talked about the most. He is getting more first-team reps than either of the receivers. And it sounds like there is going to be some real excitement for him. And Greg Roman said today that he thinks he's going to send very quickly into this offense and establish himself. We can talk about the role here, but the early returns for Oronde Gadsden, who I wasn't super high on, it sounds like they have identified the role that they want him to play, and they have a very specific way that they are looking to use him, which is obviously a lot of vertical stuff. But Daniel Popper also mentioned that he's showing some really fluid after the catch potential as well. So overall, I think the tight end room is just going to be in a much better spot from where it was last year. And Gadsden is a big part of that. And Roman, he's a little selective about hyping players up. Like he will say, oh, we like this player, we're happy with them. But when he mentions things a little bit more specifically, you kind of like take notice. And he seems to like Gadsden quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, they traded up for him, so the team liked him. They mentioned in the call to him on draft day, like, we have a specific role for you. Here's how you're going to help us. And so far, that's materialized. Chris Rim pointed out, very active pass catcher today, a bunch of catches, a couple of them in traffic. I think this is where Gadsden shines, because like we can't forget our evaluation of him, which included quite a bit of like, can he block? And the answer is generally like no, because that's not his role. So in situations like this in minicamp where you're not, having to block. You're not out there beating each other up, fighting against a defender across from you on a different team. I think this is where he can shine. So, but I'm still, you can see all these roles, all this talent, whatever, to actually just get out there and show off as he has so far and be in pretty much every write-up, I feel like so far, is at least a very positive sign.
Yeah. So earlier this week, I went back and watched some Joe Alt tape from his rookie season, which that dude is going to be a freak of nature this year at 330 pounds. But, I watched like the Bengals game in particular. Was one thing that really jumped out to me was how active the tight ends were and how when they were successful in those roles. And that was a pretty big Stone Smart game. Will Dissly caught that, wonderful touchdown, the seam pass. The tight ends are going to be very active in this offense. And so I think if Gadsden can come in and be this instant impact player, and I'm certainly not expecting him to be like a 500-yard receiver, but if he can give you a couple catches a game and you have Will Dissly, you have Tyler Conklin, and those three plus Scott Matlock can kind of control the field and they can be playmakers in the passing game. They can all block relatively well. I think Tyler Conklin's like an okay blocker. I wouldn't say he's like amazing.
Yeah.
That also just gives them a little bit more flexibility on the roster spot, because if Conklin is struggling as a blocker and Gadsden is struggling as a blocker, well, then you probably need Tucker Fisk to make the roster too. But if Conklin and Gadsden can be positive blockers, then that just opened things up. And since Will Dissly isn't going to have to be the main pass catching tight end, he can focus more on his, intended role as the main blocking tight end. So Gadsden potentially hitting and giving them, 250 yards as a rookie would be huge. It gives them, 4 or 5, explosive play potentials. Can he give them, some yards after catch where Dissly wasn't really, I know his overall numbers were great, but it's a lot of the screen stuff, right? So if you take Will Dissly's screen role and you give that to Gadsden, that can change your offense, even if you're just doing that. And then you add in the verticality. So I wasn't super high on Gadsden overall as a prospect, like you mentioned. But if they're going to put him in this very hyper-specific role where it's screens, it's vertical stretches, it's wheel routes, I think he can be very good for this team. And if that happens this year, then it gives them so much flexibility.
Yeah, I think I definitely underestimated his impact. Again, we'll see. Like you said, it could just be 1 to 2 catches per game, but they're important ones. They're what field stretching receptions, that sort of thing. So, God, I'm struggling to speak this week. I don't teach for 1 week and I forget how to speak. But yeah, I think I maybe underestimated his early impact. So hopefully he can be this tier star heap still.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Okay, our audio audience is going to take a quick break, and on YouTube we are going to continue right along. All right. I think offensively, there's a couple other things that we can hit. Is there anything on that side of the ball that you wanted to touch on in particular?
I think we hit on everybody. We could talk about running backs. To me, I just like the praise is great. They're not hitting each other. And so I don't really have much to glean from the praise that's there. Obviously, like Vidal got some praise, I think, last week as well. Alex Insdorf was keen to point that one out for no particular reason. So of course, he would promote that propaganda. But just purely on the offensive side, no, I think that's it.
Okay. I definitely agree with that. We won't talk about it a ton, but Zion and Bozeman they're your starters, folks. The offensive line starting 5 is set. We've kind of been saying this for a long time, but Harbaugh and Roman both talked about the interior offensive line competition the last 2 days. They didn't even mention a third player for, potentially starting at left guard. So it is going to be Zion Johnson and Bradley Bozeman starting in some capacity.
Mm-hmm.
I do have to kind of raise my hand. Like I didn't really buy that the Zion Johnson center thing was ever going to be more than like a couple snaps. It sounds like that's going to be pushed into training camp. So I was a little bit wrong there, but those 2 guys will be starting. It's just kind of a matter of where.
Yeah, so just bringing up a super chat while we're here from your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. If Zion wins the center spot, who would be at left guard? Don't think they would sign anyone. They might just plug in anyone from the roster. Hope it's Sawyer. As Steven mentioned, it is Bradley Bozeman. And that was kind of the hang up for me on the whole, like, Zion Johnson starting at center thing, or actually getting a thing at center. Haha, that's funny. Who's your left guard? I didn't realize at the time that would just be the loser of the center competition.
Yeah.
It doesn't make me feel great.
No.
But yeah, now as we've seen over the last couple of months or so, the last month, it's like, oh, okay, so that's your left guard plan. So your plan is just to, like, ultimately, I hope this works out. And maybe it's just, look, Bozeman's not going to be a great starter at either spot. So let's at least see if Zion can be better at center, I suppose. But they're banking on two players who do not play those positions to be better at those new positions, basically, than they were at positions they had played before, which is a tough sell for me at this point.
Yeah. It's very much a tough sell. The group, the interior group as a whole should be better with Mekhi Becton, right? But as we've talked about, we just wanted a little bit more. I don't want to rehash everything I ranted about last week, but it sounds like every role is pretty much spoken for. Like you have to figure out who's center, who's left guard. But the Chargers are very much, they seem like a team that's like, we're just gonna go in order of our best players. And they think that this is their best five, and they have to kind of sort out where those players are playing. And then Trey Pipkins is your next guy off the bench, and then just Jamari Sawyer after that. And then Andre James is your backup center. He did take some guard snaps yesterday, but it was with the third team offense. So he's their backup center. And those are your main 8. And then, Branson Taylor is probably your 9th guy. Maybe Carson Barnhart can beat him out for that last spot. But I really just wish they would have done something more at the left guard spot. If this was your plan, if Zion and Bozeman were going to be your 2 guys, I wish they would have had some other option that could actually challenge them. And I don't want to rehash everything, but yeah, folks, that is your group. That's set.
Yep. Bozeman is your starter. It hasn't even been like a it's not even like, I don't think we've even seen a competition unless Bozeman's just been off to the side during OTAs. It's just been like Bozeman, Zion, Bozeman. There's no like Bozeman, Trey Pipkins combo or Andre James, Jamari Sawyer combo for the first team. It's just those two. So the loser of the center competition is your left guard, which is an interesting one. I don't recall the Chargers having that before. The good news is it seems like there's a competition, but then there's also like a loser of that competition, and that loser is rewarded with being a starter at left guard.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. All right, switching gears here a little bit. Mr. Derwin James had himself a wonderful practice yesterday. That's no real surprise. I mean, he was covering Willie Snead in practice. Like, of course, he's going to do well. But I think it's notable of how they were using him, at least yesterday. So yesterday, it sounds like he was lining up in the slot, like exclusively in practice drills. Today, he was seen doing pass rush reps with the edge rushers. So was Daiyan Henley. Derwin has done this in the past. It's nothing real. It's nothing new. Like he always wants to continue to work on his pass rush drills, which is awesome to hear. But I am kind of wondering just how much safety Derwin is actually going to be playing this year. Because, you listen to them talk about Elijah Molden, you listen to them talk about Alohi Gilman. Obviously, they have Tony Jefferson. RJ Mickens has flashed a couple times in springtime. It kind of maybe seems to me like Derwin is just going to play slot, dime linebacker, edge rusher. Like he's just going to be at the line of scrimmage in some kind of capacity this year, which I think is probably his best role. And I think it's very interesting that they're potentially leaning more into what worked for them in the second half of last season.
Yeah, their third safety, let's say it's Alohi Gilman, their third safety and that safety rotation behind him is better than what you can do with like slot corner if you're trying to just like move pieces around. Like putting the 3 safeties out there is far better for your defense than Derwin deep safety and Jasir Taylor in the slot, for example. So yeah, I think him playing the slot in the box, pass rushing, all that is the best thing we can see him do. Yes, we've discussed this in the Staley era. It just didn't work out. It now seems to fit him like a glove with this particular scheme with Minter. So have at it. Like he is en route to first team all pro kind of stuff this year if he stays healthy.
Yeah, I agree with that. So he did cover Tyler Conklin and had some good reps against Tyler Conklin, according to Daniel Popper as well. So it wasn't only Willie Snead. But you listen to Derwin James talk, man, and it's just so easy to hear and understand why the team loves him as much as they do, because he's just such a tone setter. And if you can get him more around the football, I just think it does so many more things for this football team across the board. So, Derwin James, when he was in the slot asking, your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man asking about this, Cam Hart was back in practice yesterday, which is great news. He mentioned that he was going to be back for minicamp, and he was. When he was in the slot with the first team defense, the two outside corners were Tarheeb Still and Dante Jackson. And then Cam Hart and Benjamin St. Juste were the two outside corners with the second team defense. So I expect them to continue to rotate guys opposite of Tarheeb Still. Tarheeb Still did get some reps in the slot yesterday's practice as well. So it kind of just basically seems like Derwin's your starting slot, Tarheeb Still is your backup slot, and your starting outside corner. And then they'll figure out the other spot between Cam Hart, Benjamin St. Juste, and just your Taylor and Dean Leonard and whoever else they want to put in there. But this it's going to be so interesting to me how they manufacture this or put together this room at corner with Derwin James getting so many snaps in the slot. Does that create a spot for somebody else? Does that take a spot away from somebody? Do you keep 5 corners instead of 6? Do you keep 5 safeties instead of 4? So I think overall it's great for the team. Minter, I think, loves this plan for Derwin, but it does potentially take a spot away from somebody at corner.
Yeah. Is Elijah Molden working off to the side just a byproduct of the season-ending injury, or something?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So he's still recovering.
Okay. So it should be fine as long as that trend doesn't continue.
Yeah.
I think. Well,
he said he would be back for training camp, but
I
think they're probably taking it easy right now.
I mean, if Mickens continues to play like he does, then I just think that's your other guy, and Tony Jefferson is your practice squad bounce around kind of guy. Like, could genuinely just be active on game day the first 3 weeks, and then sign to the active roster like he did last year. I don't know.
Yeah. Either way, I'm super excited about this secondary. Calvin pointing out Mickens did have an interception today on Justin Herbert for what it's worth.
I blame the receiver.
Yeah. But overall, man, I'm just super excited about this group. I know there's not necessarily like a star corner, but I think with Derwin and with Elijah and Alohi Gilman and the development we can see from Still and Cam Hart, I think this secondary has the chance to be really special this season.
Yeah, I believe in it for sure. Jair Alexander or not.
Yeah, for sure. There was a lot of Daiyan Henley talk over the last couple of days. A lot of Tarheeb Still talk, which is nothing new there. I mentioned Daiyan working with the edge rushers a little bit on some pass rush moves, but Derwin mentioned that his expectation for Daiyan this year is to be an all-pro player, and that those two are competing in every sense of the word. They hang out a ton. This feels like very much like Keenan and Mike from back in the day to me, just on defense. Like, I think Daiyan is just wisely being very attached to the hip to Derwin James and just trying to do everything that guy does, which is a great approach from him.
Yeah, not a bad player to attach yourself to, that's for sure. But their roles are obviously different, but very similar as well in the way they utilize him. Henley's going to rush, or wait, he's not rushing. He's dropping back to the middle third of the field, or covering this tight end, whatever it is. So that's a perfect person to attach yourself to, especially as a former safety himself.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, all pro is very difficult to get, obviously, and our expectations for players like that are your like Rashawn Slaters, maybe a Justin Herbert,
right.
Joe Alt. But my expectation is great linebacker play. Like, awards or not, I expect Daiyan Henley to be a great linebacker this year.
Yeah.
And unlike Tarheeb Still, Daiyan Henley basically showed it for all of last year. Like, he was the starter. He showed it. He showed the elite stuff, high-end play, sustained an injury, and I think wasn't like the same after that, but still a great player. So not like Tarheeb Still I expect to be good, breakout this year perhaps. Daiyan Henley I expect to be a great linebacker this year.
Yeah, Pro Bowler for sure. I think that's a very safe expectation. All Pro linebacker is such a frustrating, award, because it's it's like a legacy award. Like
Bobby
Bobby
Wagner.
Wagner was an all-pro player this year and like had no reason to be an all-pro player. Roquan Smith, same kind of thing, had a down year by all accounts, even according to Roquan, and he still was an all-pro player. So as long as Fred Warner stays healthy, he's going to be an all-pro. He's first all-pro linebacker. So you're really only fighting. You're fighting for 3 other spots, and I think even Roquan is probably in that same kind of conversation. So to be an all-pro, I think Daiyan would have to get like 3-4 sacks, 3-4 interceptions, force a lot of fumbles, obviously play very well in primetime opportunities. But I think Pro Bowl is a very safe expectation for him. I think he should have been one last year.
Yeah.
But this year, if he can continue to improve, even if he can give you a couple sacks, 1 or 2 interceptions, couple forced fumbles, that should be enough for the Pro Bowl. And there's enough of like the film community pushing Daiyan Henley narratives right now that I think Pro Bowl is a pretty safe expectation. But all pro is it's such a legacy thing for whatever reason that I don't know if that's like super realistic. I think he should be in that conversation, but he's going to have to be kind of go up to that extra level of turnovers to really beat out those older guys who have been around for a long time.
Yeah, other than his play, the best thing going for Daiyan Henley is the fact that he's extremely comfortable in front of the camera, and people
Also
love
that.
him. So, like, if the Chargers are successful this year and people really pay attention to the defense, like Daiyan Henley was, like, we knew about him, we followed him, but he was the guy who didn't play much. And then the film community kind of caught on like the second half of the year and really started pointing out Daiyan Henley. Now, heading into this year, I think everyone's pretty aware. So last year, second team All-Pro. Frankie Louvu, Bobby Wagner, Zaire Franklin with the Colts. And then first team was Zach Bond, Fred Warner, Roquan Smith.
Yeah.
I could see him getting one of those 6 spots, to be honest, if they have 6 this year.
Yeah, I think that format is going to stay the same. So I think he should be in that conversation. I didn't realize Frankie Louvu was one of those guys, but he had like 8 sacks, I think. Like
he's always been a almost pure pass rusher kind of guy.
Yeah, so that's a tough one to beat. But Daiyan stock is very, very clearly up. One other thing that I wanted to point out from Daniel Popper, he's kind of been pounding the drum here for undrafted free agent safety Jalen Jones. Maybe not as a like make the 53 guy, but he has been somebody who's consistently been making plays. He had an interception yesterday, and Popper, he's one of the 3 main UDFAs that Popper has been talking about. So he's definitely somebody to keep an eye on in training camp, somebody that could potentially be like a, practice squad lock kind of conversation, because we just talked about the safety room. It's very difficult to crack that rotation right now. But Jalen Jones has been, getting some steady mentions from Mr. Daniel Popper.
Love to hear it. I've not watched him yet for UDFAs. I guess I should now.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm going to, honestly. But I think like your 3 most interesting UDFAs are obviously Rocket Sanders, who they paid the most money to, Steve O'Klotz, who has been talked about publicly, and then Jalen Jones has been making plays quite often. So those 3 are your main 3. I find it very difficult to picture any of them making the active roster, just given where the Chargers roster is at. Like it's really difficult for me to find those spots for those 3 players. Rocket obviously would have the best chance to beat out Kamani of the 3, but those are obviously the 3 that have been getting the most hype right now.
Yeah. Sanders, rightfully so, I suppose. He's also like the only running back. So of course he's going to be getting we'll all know who he is. Yeah. Steve O'Klotz is the one I got to pay attention to, that I'm very curious to see in live settings.
Yeah. Once the pads come on, we'll know. Speaking of kind of my rewatching experience with Joe Alt, I found the Scott Matlock blocking tape to be very up and down last year. There were some really high moments. Like there was a couple kick out blocks where he pulled across formation against the Bengals that were fantastic. And then I rewatched the Patriots game, and he I formation, like typical lead, and just rooted out a linebacker on multiple occasions as like the A gap kind of lead blocker. But there were some other pretty significant whiffs, that led to some negative runs from the Chargers running back. So if Steve O'Klotz and Tucker Fisk can continue to make strides there, I would not be opposed to them potentially taking Scott Matlock's spot. But I know the Chargers really, really value his flexibility and versatility, and obviously they threw him some wheel routes and things like that last year. But Matlock needs to take a step as a blocker. Like he is definitely somebody who I need to see some improvement from in the preseason in order for me to feel like super comfortable with just handing him the starting fullback spot.
Yeah, I agree. I think Matlock will take that step forward. I think he will keep the spot, but Klotz will make it interesting.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Okay, I was hoping that we would get an Eric Smith update. Obviously, Popper takes a little bit longer with his from day 2, so we have not gotten that one just quite yet. Let me see if there's one from. Okay, Eric Smith's is up, so we'll run through this real quick.
Okay.
His first one is Oronde Gadsden highlights here. Cool. So he had 7 total catches today in team drills. Mr. Oronde Gadsden did. Herbert said that he's picked up the offense really well and is beginning a bunch of reps with us. Anytime I can get out there and get him the ball to see what he can do, he's made some big plays. I mentioned the 7 catches. So most of them were vertical routes. Roman said he's flashing some really good things, and as any rookie, he's learning a lot along the way. So yeah, Oronde Gadsden, big day today for the rookie tight end.
That's awesome. Loved everything about him as a receiver, so I'm glad to see that translate so far.
Yep, I definitely agree there. Alohi Gilman had a good day in practice today. He forced an interception in the skeleton drill. Gilman had another deflected pass. So big day.
I'm rooting for Gilman this year. I really think like you see him and hear players talk about him, how every year there's someone who's a late day 3 guy or a UDFA, and they're always like, yeah, Gilman texted me like, hey, I've been there, done that. Like, how can I help? Because I was a guy who was a late buried guy on the depth chart. Like they tried to draft his replacement over and over again. And he made it to another contract. So I'm hoping I'm rooting for him this year.
Yeah, there's a very vocal portion of the fan base that does not like Alohi Gilman.
Yes.
But he's a very good player. He was PFF's like 5th highest graded safety in 2023. And the Chargers publicly last year were like, yeah, we have the best safety duo in the league. So yeah, Alohi Gilman's a good player. Maybe he's not, capable of taking that leap that I thought he could have last year. But the Chargers are very lucky to have him and Elijah Molden because it's going to allow Derwin James to be able to move around. And Alohi is always around the football. Like his ability to create turnovers is kind of insane. So yeah, I think he's somebody that the fan base should more wrap their arms around. Not people in the chat. People in the chat who watch this show, I think, love Alohi Gilman, but you guys know which kind of group of people I'm talking about that like to hate on a lot of people, but they do not like Alohi Gilman very much.
Yeah, I mean, he was actually like a good part of the defense in Houston, like that Houston game. He was like maybe the only good part of the final Staley year. Like a very, very good season by him. Saved several games, forced several turnovers, forcing 4th down, like non-conversions. So people just don't like Alohi Gilman because it makes them feel uncomfortable when they see a player that they shit on for a few years actually turn things around. And that means that they have to acknowledge that they might have been wrong. Or that a player could improve beyond what they expected. So it makes them feel uncomfortable to talk about that. It's much easier to hate, and hate leads to the dark side or whatever that quote is. I don't know. You're more the Star Wars guy than I am. So did I botch it? I have no idea if that's the right quote.
Yeah, hate leads to anger, or anger leads to hate, I should say.
Anger leads to hate. Like, I don't even know who even says that. Is it a Yoda quote?
Yoda is the main one for that quote. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Rate that impression, everybody. Yeah, I think Gilman deserves more respect, and I think people quickly forget when he's good, how good he is.
Yeah, he was unquestionably one of their 10 best players after the 2023 season, which isn't saying a lot, but he had a very good season in 2023. Yeah, I think there's a missed tackle here and there, as Thomas points out, that definitely leave you wanting some more. But he's he was I think his RES score was like a 6. Like he's not an elite athlete, but there's just some safeties who know how to see the field properly. They know how to set the tone. They know just the right time to punch the pocket, create a turnover. And Alohi is that. Like, is he a perfect safety? No. But he's going to be very valuable this year, along with Elijah Molden, because it's just going to allow Derwin James to have that much more flexibility. So Eric's last takeaway was that Cameron Dicker had a really good day. So it must have been a pretty low-key day for the Chargers at minicamp.
I need a third thing. Cameron Dicker. I mean, when is he not
Old faithful?
I suppose. So yeah.
Dicker was 9 out of 10 today in minicamp. So
that's an A.
That's an A. That's a low percentage from Cameron Dicker. I need him to do better.
Yeah, you gotta pump up those numbers.
Yeah. Okay, we'll see what happens if we get any other Daniel Popper takeaways. We'll discuss some of those at a later time. But Tyler, did you have anything else you wanted to hit on today?
I think the patches are fun. Do they look kind of ugly on the jersey? Yeah, like they're just kind of randomly, like sporadically Tetrised on some of the jerseys.
Yeah,
but I do like some of these guys, younger guys, for example, like looking at these players who, like, maybe you didn't grow up watching them, or you don't know a ton about them, or they were on a team that you weren't really like super familiar with, to quickly identify like who the guys are and what they've meant to football, what they've meant to the Chargers, or that they're just a block of granite. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, the block of granite. You asked the question on Twitter.
Yes.
Who would your choice be for block of granite?
Okay, I first need them to define what that means.
Sure.
What does that mean?
I have no idea. I don't know.
It sounds like you're stupid, first off. If you call me a block of granite, I'd assume you're calling me an idiot.
Yeah, I think, block of granite, I think means sturdy, reliable, tone setting kind of guy. And I think like my first choice would probably be Khalil, because he is that guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do want to know some of these definitions. Like there's other ones on there that are very obvious. Derwin kind of pointed out there's all pro, there's Walter Payton Man of the Year, there's Chargers records, there's how many times we've been in the playoffs, stuff like that. Is block of granite the only like superlative that they've given? Are there other ones? I need to know more. Jim Harbaugh talked about it as kind of, Calvin points out, in college, a lot of teams will do the helmet stickers.
Mm-hmm.
This is their version of that. But I need to know more. Like, okay, so you have the block of granite. What else is there? What does that mean? Who are these players who are getting honored? And I think I would like to know more about that. So hopefully next time they see Harbaugh, they can ask, specifically some more things there.
Yeah. So Derwin has one. I'm assuming Khalil has one.
Has one of the block of granite?
Yes.
Oh, I don't know. But Derwin, according to Derwin, he has the most, which
sure.
I guess him and Khalil are like having a competition there. But Derwin wants to get, he's like, I want to get it all down my ribs. So yeah, they need to do some more. So like when Eric Smith did that article about Omari Hampton, and they talked about like the lightning bolts and what was it was a hammer or something like that.
Bolts, yeah.
Like, I think players should have those. I think that would be a cool touch for the young players, because they don't have like all pros and things like that. But yeah, I need to know more about the stickers and how players get them, aside from obviously like the awards.
Yeah, other block of granite players. I don't know. I kind of feel like Cameron Dicker deserves a block of granite.
Yeah,
sticker.
I think that's
fair. I don't know. It's so funny, but I love it. It's just like, here's your block of granite sticker. That's fun.
Yeah. Did your team growing up or anything have helmet stickers?
Yeah, we had helmet sticker. I mean, I had helmet stickers in 8th grade. We had, I think we just had, because we were the Barons. So I think we just had like stickers with our logo, and then we had like stars for like either great games, or I forget what it was, something like that.
Yeah, so our coaches, we were the Cottonwood Colts, and so we had if you hit certain statistics or things like that, you would get a horse sticker. If you
all right,
yeah, if you had like if you broke like a record or something like that, or you were, voted all state, you would get a star. That was how our coaches did it. So
Pretty cool.
there were a lot of horse stickers, but not a lot of stars. Our team is not very good.
What was how many playoff stickers did you guys have? We didn't have
my freshman year, we made it to the state championship game.
Wow. Okay.
We had that senior class that we had that year. There were 9 players who went D1, which is the most at our school in the history of the school. Like our left tackle went and played at USC. We had a receiver go play at BYU, safety at Utah State, stuff like that. After that, we were not very good. Our coaches left, things like that. They changed the boundaries, so we lost a lot of the Polynesian community from our school.
You're toast.
Yeah, we went from like one of the best teams in the state to my senior year. We like barely made the playoffs, and we got crushed in the first round of the playoffs. So, yeah, the senior class when I was a freshman, they were incredible. They made the state Final Four twice, championship game once. They were really, really good, but my group, we did not have the same luck.
Yeah. I don't remember much. I have not been in schools since 2013, 2012 for you. It's been a minute.
Yeah. 2012, man, crazy. Okay, we'll take questions for a little bit, maybe 10 minutes or so before we hop out of here. As such, our audio audience is going to take one more quick break, and then our YouTube audience is going to continue right along. Okay, some super chats to get us started here. So if you guys in the chat have any questions, send them in. This is potentially our last Q&A we'll do for a few weeks. So send them in real quick here. Sean kicking us off says, thanks, boys. Means a ton. We appreciate it. Again, congratulations for your engagement. Wish you guys nothing but happiness. Mark Scott with a super sticker. So
thank you, Mark,
for sending that in. Your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man said, trade Lad rollout with Disley, Klotz, Fisk, and Matlock as your main targets. Yeah.
Guess what? Greg Roman will not have to trade Lad McConkey to do just that. He will do Disley, Klotz, Fisk, and Matlock as your main targets. You don't have to trade McConkey to see that this year. I promise that will be there one day, and we're all going to point at the screen.
Yeah, they would do those 3 tight end plus Josh Palmer looks, and Palmer was like never ever thrown to on those situations. It was always to one of the tight ends. I can't remember which game I was watching on Tuesday, but or yesterday, I guess. But Herbert had to like roll out, and they were like, it turned into a scramble drill with Tucker Fisk and Scott Matlock on the front side, and then Herbert just like chucked it into the third row because there was just no chance that anyone was going to get open. I was like, oh boy, this is not great.
So Herbert dumps it intentionally into the dirt when either he has fractured ribs or it's Matlock and Fisk in front of him.
Yeah, pretty much.
Great.
Pretty much. It was fun to rewatch those games from a Herbert scramble perspective. I rewatched the Titans game. I rewatched the Bengals game, the Broncos game at home. He scrambled a lot in those games, and definitely sparked the Chargers offense on several occasions. So hopefully we can see some more Herbert scrambles this year. Mighty with another one in here. He wants to know who we think has more all-purpose yards by week 5, Najee or Omarion. That's a good question.
I'm going to say Hampton, not necessarily because I think the averages maybe, I don't know, but I think Hampton has that 160-yard play that Harris might not, that I think in just 5 weeks, or at least 4 weeks, if you're saying by week 5, I think Hampton gets like that one big play that Harris maybe doesn't.
Yeah, and Hampton is, I think, more likely to be the third down guy just because he's much more in tune with a potential receiving opportunity. I think Najee's probably going to be more safe as a pass protector, so they might rotate a little bit more there.
Yeah.
But because of the pass catching ability, I think it'll be Omarion. And he's had some moments in practices so far. You know, he ran like a wheel route a couple of weeks ago, and Herbert hit him. So I think hopefully Greg Roman has a running back now that he trusts to throw the football to, and Omarion can actually get some, you know, if he could get like 15 catches this year, I'd be stoked.
That's terrible.
One catch a game, and I'm happy.
Jesus. Oh man. Yeah, that'd be great, I guess.
Najee's going to have a role for this team, and obviously J.K. Dobbins signed with the Broncos today. I know a lot of people were upset about that. You and I definitely wanted Dobbins back over somebody like Najee, but they can't stop talking about Najee, man. Like they're very excited to have him around, and I think just the consistency aspect of Najee and Omarion is going to elevate the floor of this Chargers run game much higher than when it was last year.
Yeah. Some people didn't like J.K. Dobbins' quote. I think if you pull the quote itself, it's worse than if you just listen to him, where obviously he wanted to be back and he was essentially bummed and kind of surprised. He said it was kind of weird that he wasn't brought back, which I'd kind of get after the year he had. Like,
Sure.
hey, shouldn't I be back? Didn't happen. He could also just be referring to the tender situation, that being kind of weird too, because it was odd.
Yeah.
But then he said, like my focus is on winning, and I don't want to lose playoff games. I've been in the playoffs several times and I've lost every one, so I just want to be here where I can win. Of course, some Chargers fans were like, "Oh, he hates the Chargers." I think he just was just saying like, I want to win, and that is my focus. Not Chargers suck and they can't win.
Yeah, I didn't take anything by it other than the fact that he's focused on maximizing his chances to win, and a lot of players do like the whole thing where they can go to a division rival and play another team twice and things like that. But there's also like the geography aspect of it. He's going from Baltimore to LA. Denver's not like super far away from LA, so I don't know. He didn't have a ton of options, man, and like from a Chargers perspective, I think you and I both wanted him back, but they've highlighted Najee's durability at every chance they can get. And Najee was hurt with 2 different injuries last year. Excuse me, JK was hurt twice last year with 2 different injuries, which I think is a thing that kind of gets lost from last season. So, it sucks, but I think that's the main reason why they wanted to go in a different direction is they just wanted to get some guys in here who could be healthy, durable, consistent on a down to down basis. Like JK, his explosive play potential was the main reason why the Chargers run game was even any kind of effective. But, he would bounce some runs that would not have to be bounced. He would see the hole incorrectly several times. So his consistency was not where I think the Chargers wanted it to be.
Yeah, I mean, Edwards with Michigan at one point was more explosive, and same with Corum. But there's kind of a way with Michigan with Hassan Haskins a couple years ago, with Blake Corum in that championship run. Like, just has to be a consistent aspect of your game, not necessarily an explosive part of one. Now, we would like to have that happen, but they're going more for consistency. And then they also drafted Hampton, who's going to be explosive.
Yeah. Last question from Tom regarding this particular thing about the compensatory pick from Dobbins. So I had previously said that June 1st was the expiration date. That was incorrect. The JK signing is factoring into the compensatory pick formula for the Chargers, but his base value of that contract is only $2.5 million. So the likelihood of the Chargers getting a comp pick for him is extremely low. So right now, the Chargers essentially have 4 free agents on each side factoring into the free agency formula that are all canceling each other out. Theoretically, if guys like Joshua Palmer and J.K. Dobbins hit all of their incentives and Tyler Conklin, Najee Harris, they don't, there's a chance that like at the end of the year, they could get a comp pick or 2 from one of those players signings. But right now, the Chargers are not scheduled to get any compensatory picks, which, Joe Ortiz says is obviously a very valuable, asset to their team building perspective. But unfortunately for the Chargers, they had too many holes, too much money where they are not going to get any compensatory picks for this year.
Yeah, so right now, Fulton, Palmer, and Ford are the only ones counting in their favor. Becton Harris, Jackson Conklin, and Mike Williams are counting against them. So, yeah, Wade against the Chargers right now will never wait. Does Asante Samuel Jr. only not?
Yeah, Asante would not count. If they had placed the tender on Asante, then he would count. So that's why JK is counting, for the formula. But Asante, the deadline for that particular has passed. And so he would not be going to count.
Yeah.
Calvin.
Bold. Yeah, let Dobbins run on us just a little bit. Just get those numbers up a little bit and still win.
Yeah, that would be funny. So Jim Harbaugh said guilty as charged again, which is kind of cool. I've been asked about this as well. He's not talking about us directly. Like he's not saying like our podcast. For whatever reason, he just loves that phrasing, and he continues. Us too. Obviously, it's our podcast name. But just to clarify for everybody before we end today, Jim Harbaugh probably has no idea who we are. Like I have asked him some questions in a press conference, but I don't think he knows who the Guilty as Charged podcast is, and he certainly doesn't know us well enough to mention us like basically once a month at this point. He just loves that phrasing. Like I don't know what it is about that particular phrase that he loves, but he uses it at any kind of turn that he can. So wanted to throw it out there. It is very cool. He also said yesterday that he wants to eventually bring the Chargers up to Fresno for a training camp practice, which all my Fresno friends were like, did you see this? Did you see this? And I'm like, yeah, obviously I saw it. Like, like I'm the Chargers guy. Do not come to Fresno in August, Jim. It is 110 degrees up here in August. You do not want to do practice in Fresno in August. You can come do an OTA in the spring in Fresno when it's probably like 80 degrees in March or whatever. But training camp here in August does not sound fun at all.
Yeah, no, thank you. I guess I would go to visit you, but that sounds pretty awful to go sit there. It was hot enough in like Costa Mesa to go sit there and watch those practices. Forget going to Fresno and sitting there openly watching players warm up for 2 hours and then do some practice. And then it just ends up being a special teams day. And I'm just sitting there watching Cameron Dicker go 9 for 10, which sounds, cool, I guess. But
yeah, there's also, I don't think there's any kind of facility here that would be able to host an NFL team for a training camp practice. Fresno State, where they practice, is like a field and a half. Like they don't even have a full 2 fields. So yeah, there's not enough space up here. And again, too hot. Like Fresno State, when they practice in the fall leading up to the season, they practice at like 7 a.m. first thing in the morning, or they'll practice at like 8 p.m. when the sun is down. So yeah, that's not happening. I wonder why he likes Fresno so much. Like I know he does the whole RV thing and he likes the camp. But yeah, I don't understand why he likes Fresno as much as he does.
Yeah, I was trying to go through, like, there's Greg Roman from there, or there's any Spanos family connections. Like I couldn't think of anything, to be honest.
Yeah, I know he did high school in the Bay Area, I think, right?
Yeah, not Palo Alto. What the frick is the area right around Stanford? What is that called? Gosh dang it.
I thought that was Palo Alto, honestly.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay. I just
but yeah, it would be awesome. Then I wouldn't have to drive 3 hours. There's a good amount of Chargers fans here, but it's definitely not like Southern California. No. The Chargers are probably, I would say, like the 5th most popular team here in Fresno. Maybe 4th, but
it's potentially better than it is in LA.
Yeah, I would say probably it's about the same, but obviously there's more fans down in LA.
Yeah.
But yeah, here in Fresno, the Raiders are still king. Unfortunately, the 49ers are still very, very popular. It's kind of shifting to the 49ers since the Raiders moved, but it is definitely the 49ers next. Rams and Cowboys would be after that, and then the Chargers probably.
Gotcha. Well, if it's in Fresno, just let me know where I can go to protest the military, and I'll be there.
Tyler's joking, obviously.
Joke, by the way. I'm not going to protest the military and Steven's whole family, apparently.
Yeah, imagine being that clown take, man. I do not get it. I do not.
We're gonna all be out there and we're gonna protest the practices. And we have the parking lot full of protesting practices.
Like, okay, you go protest the practice open to military families. Good luck.
Yeah, I think one thing that is super cool about Jim Harbaugh is that he will be largely very honest with things that he is asked about, unless it's like technical things. But he was asked about why they're going down to San Diego, and he was like, that's where a lot of our fans are. We want to reward our fans
Yeah.
and have a fan event. And so we're gonna, have a practice down there, and it's gonna be fun and it's gonna be cool. And it just so happens that it's gonna be at where he got his coaching start. But I would expect them to do it every year at this point. They did the whole Camp Pendleton thing last year, University of San Diego this year. So it sounds like this is just going to be a thing, every year going forward, which I think is overall very positive for that area. And, I don't want to get too far into the whole San Diego aspect of things, but Harbaugh is a man of the people, and he will go where the fans are. So I love that about him.
Yeah, people could not figure out, or I'm sorry, not people. A few people with a mildly small platform could not figure out why he'd be doing that.
Yeah,
I think it's pretty obvious.
Yeah, so I missed this earlier. Mighty following up on that. Apologies there, but he wants us to expand if we think this is Najee's first minus 1,000 yard season or sub 1,000 yard season. I guess is probably the best way to say that.
I mean, in my bold predictions, I did say yes, but that's not a knock on Najee Harris as much as this is a very nice like 1-2 punch, or they're throwing it maybe more than expected. Like everyone wants all these receivers to have 500 yards or 1,000 yards, all these tight ends, 800 yards. That means you have to throw it. And it's like, so the snaps and the targets and all that, the volume has to go somewhere. So I think Najee Harris could have 1,000 total yards. Same with Hampton, but I think he goes under 1,000. But it's a very efficient running a game.
Yeah, I think between him and Omarion, plus whoever is the third running back, will get some carries every now and then. Like Haskins in the second half of the season was getting, 2, 3, 4 carries a game. Mostly they were short yardage situations. But I would say yes, but it's not really Najee's fault. I think just the usage is I envision this as a true 50-50 split in terms of carries between him and Omarion. And I think that's going to lead to less volume, and he's never really been super explosive in the NFL. So I would say yes, but I still think he can have a very effective, like 850 yards rushing is probably what I would predict right now if I had to, maybe 800 in that kind of range. So yes, but I still think Najee can bring a lot of value to this team.
Yeah. There's also a point where like he isn't your running back of the future, I don't think. So at some point they might just turn it to Hampton because he's the guy of the future. And so Harris does not necessarily need to be the guy the rest of the year.
Yeah. If Najee is, if Omarion hits like we think he is going to, I think what starts as a 50-50 split could become like a 60-40 split. I don't think ever truly like becomes a non-factor.
No.
Like I think they signed him obviously for a reason, and they want him to be, a big factor. And so far the early impressions he's making are very positive, but I could definitely see a world where Hampton becomes the more likely 1,000-yard rusher of the two.
Yeah, I think I'd agree there.
All righty. Any other final thoughts or questions that stood out to you, Tyler?
That's it. It's been a good couple of days of minicamp so far, other than some minor bumps and bruises, no significant injuries, knock on wood. So I'm happy for how things are going so far.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. Definitely some minor things, but some guys working back from some things as well. So the wonky schedule is going to continue. We'll keep you guys posted about next week. Tyler has some vacations in July, so we'll probably take a couple weeks off in July as the Chargers are taking some time off, but we'll certainly have some, training camp preview tickets coming over the next few weeks, diving into some of these, position battles, rewatching some guys. I've rewatched Thule, I've rewatched Joe Alt. I want to get into some of the other players from last season and kind of figure out where players could go, watching some draft picks more often. We'll see what happens there. But we'll have some training camp previews and things like that, and some other off-season tickets as well. Okay, so that's going to do it for us today. Make sure like, comment, review, all that good stuff does continue to help grow the podcast. This has been another episode of the Guilty as Charged podcast. We'll see you guys next time. Bolt up.